Good morning, everybody. I'm here today to begin discussing with you using benchmark fractions to help us compare fractions. So when I talk about a benchmark fraction, I'm talking about a fraction that's easy to identify. So for today, we're mostly going to be looking at the benchmark fraction 1/2. Okay, we have seen this slide a few times, so I'm going to just review it one more time with you. Okay, because we need to know all the different fractions that are equal to 1/2. So we have 1/2, 1 out of 2. We have 2/4, 2 out of 4, 3 out of 6. Whenever that numerator is half of the denominator, that means that it's equal to 1/2, 4/8, 5/10, and 6/12. You can think about your doubles to help you remember, and you could also think about your 2 times tables. Since 3 times 2 is 6, that means 3 is half of 6, and that means that you can identify 3/6 as 1/2. The same for 4/8. 4 times 2 is 8. So 4 is half of 8. 5/10, 6/12. Okay, now we're going to look at these fractions that are equal to 1/2 on a number line. Okay, so the first thing I want to show you is that on the left-hand side is the number 0 all the way down. That's where 0 is represented. And then on the right-hand side is the number 1 being represented. A lot of the questioning today is going to be asking you which fractions are closer to 1 than 0, or closer to 0 and than 1. That means that is it on this side of 1/2? Or is it on this side of 1/2? So if it's on this side of 1/2, meaning less than 1/2, that means that it is closer to 0. And if it's on this side of 1/2, closer to 1. So here we have 1/2. Okay, the next fraction equal to 1/2, if you watch me pull my cursor down, is 2/4. Okay, so because 2/4 is equal to 1/2, we know that 1/4 is less than 1/2. We know that, okay, 1/4 is closer to 0 than 3/4, okay, because 3/4 is closer to 1. So we know 1/4 is less than 1/2, and we know that 3/4 is more than 1/2. Let's move down now to 3/6. Okay, we know that both 1/6 and 2/6 is less than 1/2 because, okay, 2 is less than 3/6, so 2/6 is less than 3/6. So if it's 3/6, we have to know, okay, 3/6 is 1/2, so 2/6 is less than that. And then, so 1/6 is less than that. So, okay, we have to see, okay, if we were to compare 1/6 with 1/2, or even 2/6 with 1/2, we need to know that it's less than 1/2 because 3/6 is 1/2. That's why I've been talking so much about fractions equal to 1/2. Each lesson I've shown this slide to you, this slide that I showed earlier, because it's very important when we don't have like numerators and we don't have like denominators, we can use 1/2 as a benchmark to help us. For example, if I wanted to compare 3/8 with 2/4, I know that 4/8 is equal to 2/4. I know that 2/4 is 1/2. I know that 4/8 is 1/2. So I know that 3/8 is less than 2/4 based on that benchmark. Okay, going to 5/10 again. Anything less than 5/10, 4/10, 3/10, 2/10, and 1/10 is less than anything equal to 1/2. 4/8, 3/6, 2/4, and 1/2. And the same for 6/12. So I'm going to show you some of the types of questions that you'll be seeing today. You may see very similar, you might see the exact same ones. Again, there's different slides within the Practice Buddy. Okay, so I'm not going to really give answers away. I'm just going to talk you through these. So if you look here, this will be one of your types of questions. It says choose from the fractions 2/3, 1/6, 3/4, and 3/8. Which of these fractions are closer to 0 than to 1? 2/3 is tough because it's an odd number. 3 is an odd number. So we'll go back to that one, okay? So let's look at 1/6. Again, if it's less than 1/2, it's closer to 0. If it's more than 1/2, it's closer to 1. Okay, so 1/6, is it closer to 0 or 1? Well, how many sixths equal 1/2? 3/6 equals 1/2. So if it's less than that, it's closer to 0. If it's more than that, it's closer to 1. How about 3/4? How many fourths are equal to 1/2? 2/4 are equal to 1/2. So 3/4, 3 is greater than 2. So is that closer to 0 or 1? Is it more than 1/2 or is it less than 1/2? Same thing for 3/8. 4/8 is equal to 1/2. So is 3/8 less than half or more than half? Now going back to 2/3, okay? Thirds we sort of just have to remember. All right, we know 1/2 is here. Okay, and it's kind of easy to remember that 1/3 is less than half and 2/3 is more than 1/2. So is that 2/3 closer to 1 or 0? Next type of question, you'll see a review type question. Here we should immediately look to see what if anything is the same. Here the denominators are the same. So remember the rule with denominators, when the denominators are the same, it's very straightforward. Think about the same circle and the same 8 parts. 5 of them and 7 of them, which is more? But take a look here, okay? Neither the numerator or denominator are alike. So what we can look at is benchmark fractions. Do I see a fraction here equal to 1/2? I do. 2/4 is equal to 1/2. So now I have to decide, is 4/6 greater than 1/2 or less than 1/2? Well, how many sixths did we say earlier equals 1/2? How many sixths equals 1/2? Look right here. Okay, 3/6 is equal to 1/2. So 2/4 is equal to 1/2. So 3/6 and 2/4 are equal to each other because they're both 1/2. So where is 4/6? Greater than 1/2 or less than 1/2? Here you have a word problem. Bailey compares 2 wholes that are the same size. That just means she's comparing the same shapes. They're the same size. Think of 2 pizza pies, 2 circles, 2 rectangles, 2 number lines. He says that 2/3 is greater than 2/8 because 2/3 is greater than 1/2 and 2/8 is less than 1/2. I can't click the drop downs for you because this is a copy. Okay, but this will say Bailey is correct or Bailey is not correct. Because 2 1/3, here's your unit fraction. So 2 1/3 fraction strips, that's 2/3, are greater than less than 1/2. So 2/3 is greater than or less than 1/2. So 2 1/8 fraction strips, that's your unit fraction. So 2 of them gives you 2/8. Is that greater or less than 1/2? I'll give you a hint. One of these is greater than 1/2 and one is less. You have to fill in the correct drop downs. And then finally here, you'll see a couple problems like this where you have to decide who has run closer to 1 mile than 0. So who ran 1/2 or more? See, one of these is equal to 1/2, so I actually don't know. So if you look at Aria, it says she's equal to 2/4. The question says who has run closer to 1 mile than 0 miles. Well, she didn't run closer to 1 mile than 0 miles. She ran exactly the same. So I would say do not choose her in this case. If it said who ran greater than or equal to 1/2, then you could choose her, but I wouldn't choose her here. All right, but that's our benchmark, okay? 2/4 is our benchmark. 3/6 is our benchmark. 4/8 is our benchmark, okay? And there's no benchmark with thirds, but remember what I said about thirds. 1/3 is less than half. 2/3 is more than half. Okay, I don't want to give away too much, so that's all I will say about today's lesson and the problems you'll see. Okay, so do your best in answering these questions. Just remember what's equal to 1/2. It's 2/4. I think this is a better visual. Equal to 1/2 is 2/4, 3/6, 4/8, 5/10, and 6/12. You have to remember that. They're your doubles. Okay, that's an appropriate thing for you to remember. What's equal to 1/2. Okay, that is it for today, and I hope you enjoyed this, and good luck. Have a great